Welcome to episode number 18 of the Soft Dump in the Corner. We are trying out something new today. As you can see, we got a little audio and the video cooking with us today. We're rocking and rolling. We got my buddy Luke. Luke, how we doing today?
What's going on, everybody? I'm excited to be here.
Good start. We got to get some content rolling. This is good to have a little bit of video. You can see our faces are made for radio, so bear with us on that one while we get this cooking. But buddy, wild news lately in the show. We're going to get to that. For all of you waiting, we got a lot of opinions on what's happened. Obviously, Calgary's been shaking up the league. That's no doubt, no shocker to anybody. We'll just give our opinions on that. Obviously, touch base on some free agents. There's still a lot of good hockey players out there that are going to make some teams some better, or play better, so to speak. Tough wording today on the English, but I just wanted to touch base on like what's been cracking this summer. We don't necessarily have to start out with the hockey side of things. I mean, how are we doing otherwise? What's been going on since we last chatted?
Not much for me. I'm just coming off a 4-day vacation from work, so it's been nice to be out and about. Had a busy weekend. Me, you, and a few other guys. We saw the Chili Peppers on Sunday, which was probably one of the best concerts I have been to in a very long time. So I was really excited there. I had some friends from the States come by, so it was really nice to see them. It's been a while, so caught up, had a couple drinks, and had a bonfire on that night as well. So it's been a busy weekend for sure.
So for anybody who has not seen the Red Hot Chili Peppers, you're doing yourself a disservice not having seen them yet, and you may only get one more chance. So highly recommended. The Chili's were unbelievable. What a show. Obviously, we had Thundercat, we had the Strokes to go on, but as soon as those guys came on, they just started rocking. Like, my goodness, man. Just the hairs on your body just jump right up and you just get going, right? It was just such a cool environment. So 100% definitely really a neat opportunity to go and see them. And I've actually seen a couple of concerts this summer, believe it or not. I went and saw the Sheepdogs. They were so good. If anybody hasn't seen the Sheepdogs too, unreal. Music is crazy good. Unbelievable singer. They put on a crazy show. And even too, the Strumbellas. So I've had a little bit of a good month here for music, which is kind of cool. Gets you away from the sports side of things there. But how about sticking with music? Have you seen the Woodstock 99 documentary on Netflix?
No, someone else has told me about that too. You're not the only one, and I need to see it.
It's nuts, man. Like, it's super crazy to say the way the concerts used to run back in the day. And like, I'm telling you right now, you're going to watch the first episode and be like, whoa, that was pretty wild. You'd never be able to see shit like that. Like, people throwing like, bottles everywhere and making flames and fucking just causing havoc all over the map. Huge disaster of a concert, but it's going to go down on the record books to say the least, right? I was going to touch base with you because I wanted to know too. I mean, just to chat a little bit something different. I'm sure we've caught a couple flicks this summer. What's the go-to flick on the go? Like, what are we watching here? Is there a show? Is there a movie we got to get people cooking on to? I'll let you go first.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny on our notes. We actually had something very similar, same in common. And I watched this probably 2 months ago, and I know it's been out for like quite a while now, but it's Uncharted. And I think a lot of people, you think of Tom Holland, you think Spider-Man, and like that's his only role. Because there's some actors you go look out there and be like, this is Tom Holland, he's got to be Spider-Man, that's it. But he played a great role as Nathan Drake for the Uncharted, and partnered along with Mark Wahlberg, who's an A-list celebrity. So a very good flick. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I played the video games growing up, so the story clicked in pretty well. And then other movies, I mean, these are all obviously bigger ones like Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, I thought was pretty good. If you haven't watched the previous Marvel movies, then it might not make as much sense, but it was really enjoyable, and they introduced some new characters, so it should be good for the next era of movies for Marvel.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, if you didn't watch the other movies, or you did, you may still not make any fucking sense. But I mean, wild movie for sure. But dude, Uncharted, I don't know what it is. Tommy Holland, he's got my heart, man. That kid's such a beauty. I love watching his flicks. Yeah. It's probably, I mean, he could be one of my favorite actors right now. Him and Marky Mark, right? They put on a show, but yeah, cool movie to say the least. But yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out there a little bit different. A couple of pieces of content for you guys to jump onto if you haven't already seen. Both of which are definitely worth your time for sure. Dude, let's get into the hockey because we don't need to drain away too much. Obviously, we know a lot of the stuff that's gone down. I wanted to bring up a video that we made that was essentially picking the next captains of, at the
Yep.
time, the 8 vacancies. Those
Yep.
being, and I read, Anaheim, Arizona, Buffalo, Calgary, Montreal, the Rangers, Philadelphia, and Seattle. We obviously know that since then, or since we first discussed that, Jacob Trouba has since been named the Rangers captain. What's your thoughts on that?
Wasn't my first pick, I don't think. I don't know much about Jacob Trouba, and obviously none of us do in the locker room. Maybe he's a big leadership guy, plays a big role where we don't see him. He plays a big physical role on the back end on the ice. But who knows what he does in the locker room? Obviously, he does enough because he's got the C stitched into his jersey now. I thought maybe like Chris Kreider, some of those guys. But we just don't know the leadership in the room, and I think that plays a huge part, and that's why he has it.
100%. And I mean, if you stick around, not everyone's going to be up to date with all 32 teams in the league. It can't be like Jordan, who just sits and reads random shit at the end of the night and just wants to know the deep down research. But if you didn't know this, for anyone listening, last season, the Rangers were going to name a captain. They wanted to at least put into perspective. They wanted Panarin to be the captain. And he had come out and said, and this is just reading through the grapevine and shit that I saw that I know, and even he came out and discussed it. He didn't necessarily not want the captaincy, but he had kind of said, listen, I don't think I'm necessarily the best fit, not because of my play and not because of necessarily my leadership and this and that. But he's like, I'm not great with English. I'm not great in front of the cameras. You need someone that's going to be able to do both, and New York's a crazy big market. So even as of last year, and again, that's kind of where I had my little hints or my opinions, if you will, on where I thought that was going to end up. For anyone maybe not listening or seeing, go check out the TikTok account. We've got that growing exponentially, which is awesome. But the kid, he picked him, Jacob Trouba, to have the captaincy role. I had a good feeling about him. Phenomenal playoffs. I mean, that guy was so good. It was incredible. At times, and I'm not even kidding, I actually believe this, he was ultimately one of their best players on the ice in terms of playoff hockey. He brings what you need in terms of the dynamic in the playoff game, and it's just hard to command. I mean, obviously, the sexy picks, Kreider, Panarin, whoever, whatever, gave it to the kids. I don't know. I think it was a pretty neat thing to do. I think he's earned it. He's had a lot of tough times, obviously, with Winnipeg and going through the struggles and the ups and downs, even his early days in New York. So I think that was pretty awesome. But looking at that list, or even the name in the list, anybody that stands out to you that you might see kind of saying, hey, I have the 7 remaining teams now, like who's going to jump in that role? What are we thinking? What are your thoughts on that?
Out of all of them, I still think there's a few that won't name a captain next year. I have Arizona, Calgary, and Seattle. I just don't think they're ready to make that jump yet in terms of a captaincy, especially with Calgary. Got a lot of new faces, but a lot of big new faces. So maybe they'll give it a year or so and see how they fit in the role in Calgary, and then maybe make a captain 2 years down the road. The one that stands out to me that I feel pretty confident with is Buffalo. I really think Kyle Okposo is going to be the next captain. Even just listening to him on Chicklets, he seems like a genuine good guy. He seems like a good a leader in the locker room from what I've heard, and he's been there for a long time, and he's a good player to have with the young guys. So I really think he would be a good leader, and he'd be honored to wear the C for Buffalo. I think that's my definite one there. The other ones are a little, I don't know yet. I went off the board in Anaheim. I picked Troy Terry. I think he's the next generation of players coming up. I think he could be a good leader for them and moving forward. I know there's a lot of guys that have been there for a long time, but these new young guys are going to be the next face of this Ducks team, and I think Troy Terry could be a good one to lead them.
It's an interesting take. I haven't had that name thrown around yet for that particular vacancy, which is pretty neat. I'm in the same boat. I mean, realistically, when you look at a lot of those teams, I don't think, especially nowadays, I really don't think their teams are that worried if they don't have a captain. It's not like the old San Jose days where they're like, oh, let's strip Thornton and give it to fucking Merlot, and then let's strip it from him and give it to Couture, and then Pavelski, and you guys all take, you get a captaincy, you get a captaincy, you get a captaincy. It's like, come on. Like, if you don't think that guy's doing the job, what is stripping him of the captaincy really proving to be either him or that dressing room? To me, there's always that way more that goes down than we ever find out. But
Right.
what look does that give, right? And that's where I'm in that same boat. I agree with you. I don't necessarily, fucking Arizona, don't even worry about them. They won't name a captain for the 4 years they're playing at their university practice facility. Buffalo, I agree. Huge, huge future, bright future. Not the time, right? Calgary, weird one. Very, very weird. A lot of new faces in that barn. As you
Yep.
pointed out, there's a lot of vets that are still in that role. What's Sutter think of them, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. If they bring in a guy who's capable of handling captaincy on day one, I would argue Sutter's the kind of guy that says, yeah, I want a captain in my locker room, but I want it to
Mm-hmm.
be a guy that I trust.
Yep.
Whether he doesn't trust them or not, that's an honest opinion. I don't know. I'm sure that there's
Right.
plenty of people on that squad that are capable of it.
Yep.
But even too, the other ones, Montreal, like I said, New York's been filled, Philly, Seattle. Do they have to name one? No, absolutely not. You look at a lot of these teams and they're not necessarily rebuilding, but just coming out of either recent success or potentially in a transition, right? Montreal
Right.
just made it to the Cup Finals. They get rid of they get rid of Weber, and now
Yep.
Price isn't there. So who's your leader there, right? Realistically, I don't know. My one guy, Brandon Gallagher, you could argue it could go to the young kids.
Yep.
I don't see it personally, not that they're not capable of it, but to see a little bit of the reins spread out differently between what Weber and Price used to do, I think Gallagher's a tremendous guy to learn from. There really isn't anybody on that team that works harder than that guy out there. There's not.
Yep.
You can argue all you want, but he is literally the heart and soul of that team now,
Yep.
in my opinion at least. And then obviously Philly, Seattle, total ballpark it really. I mean, Seattle I think would like to have one, generally because they are a new franchise. They got a lot of really good vets in the place. They don't need to either. Again, with Beniers and Shane Wright now in the organization, they might play that card too. Let's just give the kids all a couple A's, see what they want to do, see who proves himself first, and go from there, right? So it's a tough one to pick. Everybody can kind of sit there and say, oh, this person. We don't know. That's like you said, we're not sitting there a fly in the dressing room as much as I'd love to be. Yeah, we're just not, right? And I tell you one thing, if I were to choose to be a fly in the wall, it'd be from San Jose 5 years ago, seeing the fucking conversations that Big Dick Joe was saying about what happened there, because they treated that guy with as much disrespect toward that vacancy as you can get. Not to say Marleau or Couture or Pavelski are not good, because all four of them could literally be captains today in the show, if they could still skate around the way that they used to. But it's tough, man. What else? Anything on your take on that? Any other names, ballparks, anything else you want to throw out there by any means?
The only one I had down here, like Philly, I have like they won't name one, but if there was going to be a name thrown around, Sean Couturier would probably be on the top of my list. You know, like he's been in the organization now for I'm gonna say 7 years, maybe 8 years.
Absolutely. Yep.
Great two-way center. Been very lucky. Well, my English is off too. Very unlucky with like injuries and all that stuff. So hopefully he gets to 100% back in, into the mode he used to be, because he's a great forward, great centerman for Philly, and I could see him wearing the C. But other than that, like Montreal, the one you said, I had Nick Suzuki written down. Maybe the young guys take a lead forward, but I don't disagree with you with Gallagher, another guy that's unlucky with injuries as well. His hand, I think, is broken like 12 times, for crying out loud. But
that's
yeah,
what happens. That's what happens when you have absolutely no concern going in front of the net.
Yep. And that's
no
what's character.
concern. If he takes a shot block off the mid, if he needs to battle,
100%.
No problem. I mean, it sucks, and you're right. It adds up, but it's the style of play, right?
Yep. And if it's not him, so Gallagher for sure. And if it's not him, maybe they look at some of the young guys that are signed long term. So Suzuki signed long term last year, so maybe he's someone that can lead the locker room in the future. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's such a historic franchise too, right? It's one of those things where you have, and this thing it doesn't piss me off Montreal, but it's one of those things where they're very, I guess, is strategic the right word? I don't know if it's strategic. They're very specific about who they can and can't put in these roles. You got to be a new head coach. You got to speak French. You want to be our GM? You got to speak French. You want to do this? You got to speak. It's like they have to fill things because of specific demographics. It's not a strictly, purely hockey focus, if you will, because of so
Yeah,
many of the different dynamics. There's not many teams in the league that have to deal with that shit. You know what I mean? And that's
yeah,
kind of interesting because to me, it's difficult, especially nowadays with a really tight cap, to make a
yep,
strong team and still be able to fill all your wants and needs at the same time, right?
yeah,
It's just next to impossible right now because you just can't do that. And like I said, it's tough. I mean, bringing in Marty last year, I think it was good for the young kids. I really do. We've seen it on countless times, and I probably should have done a bit better research to bring up this particular point. We've seen it plenty of times, not just hockey, basketball, football, where rookie coaches come in, not even necessarily coaches that had played before in the league, but just rookie coaches coming in, doing pretty well, right away. It's that new face, it's that new voice, it's
yeah,
that month to 2 months of you got a kick in the ass right now. Summer goes around, new players go around, some older players leave, some new players come in. It's not always a good fit, apples to apples, from year half or
yep,
one, let's call it, to year two. Will Caulfield make a progression? Will Savlovsky even play? Will they
hmm,
even, compete? Do they want to compete? There's a lot of different questions that are going to go in there. They basically have Jake Allen as their number one right now. Let's not
yeah,
forget.
yep,
So that's a lot to ask. I mean, he's kind of been a 1B most of his years, and a lot of hype coming out of his junior. But that's a team. That's a very interesting team, right? So I'm
yep,
I'm in the same agreement, man. I think there's quite a few that won't necessarily name captains. I don't think they need to, but
yeah,
again, some teams like it. Some teams feel that it adds a different dynamic because they had a player in the dressing room with a voice. They've got a player in the media with a voice. And then typically, more often than not, your captain's likely you're going to be your harder worker or someone that's setting an example. And you want that for the younger kids, especially if you have high end prospects, right? No better
sure,
leader than Sidney Crosby. Why is he the best leader? Because he's on the ice 8 times a week. He
yep,
doesn't skip days off. He's usually one of the last ones off the ice, one of the first ones on the ice. Like it's they're
he
cliches,
works his
but
bag
it's
off.
the honest truth. It's just
Yep.
like happy birthday, Cole, by the way.
Oh
Happy
yeah.
birthday, Kobe Bryant.
Happy
If
birthday,
you
Kobe.
want definition of leadership, definition of hard work, work ethic, this
Yep.
guy, right? That's where you get the biggest
Hundred
differences.
percent.
And I think that you have to have leadership. You have to have those dynamics in the dressing room because they go a long way in terms of gaining respect, and then ultimately producing results. Right? It's
Yep.
it's kind of hand in hand, right?
Yep.
But anyways, like I said, we can kind of jump onto that. There's tons of time before training camps open up. I think we're 49 days out from the puck drop, so about 2.5 weeks from training camp, which is exciting.
Yep. Excited.
And great transition here too. I mean, you got a lot of those World Junior players that we can, if you want to talk about that now, that are
Yep.
transitioning into their NHL teams, right? The
Yep.
cool thing I found with this timing of the tournament, usually and generally at December, Christmas time, we don't know where these kids were drafted to or are going to be drafted to.
Right.
There's a lot of kids that played in this tournament that either A, really impressed their GMs, coaches, franchises. I bet
Yeah.
you there are a lot of GMs, coaches, and franchises that said, shit, we passed on that guy for that guy, right? There were
Yeah.
a couple
Yeah.
players that you kind of looked and were like, well, you're not standing out as much as I thought you might for a first rounder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously,
Exactly.
the guys on Canada. I mean, it's tough when you look at the big four. They generally have a lot of first rounders. But was there anyone in particular that stood out to you? If you can kind of remember it, it felt like it went pretty quick this year. Um,
Yep.
it didn't seem to garner as much attention. We'll talk about that, of course. Where do you want to start? Do you want to recap? Do you want to do kind of players that you kind of stood out or whatever? Maybe the dynamics of the tournament, low attendance, TV, whatever. Like, which let's just kind of go off on whatever, right?
I'll just give my take. Well, I was obviously biased and watched a lot of the Canada games. I would be lying to you if I said I watched other games, but if there's nothing on TV, I'd probably throw on the Latvia US game or Latvia whoever or Czech Republic. But like, you know what? I mean, a lot of these guys are really good, and I got pretty like I was when I watched the Canada games against the Czech, in the Finns, and I believe it was. I don't think they play Sweden. Did they play Sweden? No.
Canada did not. No.
No. Okay. But I was pretty impressed with the Czech and Finns goaltending. And that was a lot against Canada. And even like in the gold medal game, I can't pronounce this guy. Jakola, I think was his name. Joanna Jakola. I'm probably butchering that to shit. But even though they lost to the Finns, that goalie stood on his head the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was, and I would have said he probably would have got player of the game for them if they won. So I don't know if I should have done a little more research if they were drafted or not. I know Jesper Wallstedt on Sweden was very good as well, and he's been drafted. So whoever, I forget who's got him, but my
Minnesota.
goodness, is it Mini?
Yeah, the
Oh,
only reason I know that, ironically, is the Edmonton Oilers had the one pick before them, and they decided to pass up on the goalie. And Billy Guerin swooped in and grabbed him with the next pick. So he's
yeah,
a draft pick of Minnesota, which is
yeah,
all they need is another high end prospect to jump in a couple years. But yeah, I sorry to cut you off, but that's where
that's
he
all good.
is. So they've got a good goalie. It's funny you bring up goaltending, and just sorry to cut you off, just to kind of what's on my mind here, quick. The goalie I think you're thinking of, and maybe I think there were two that played for Czech, but the one that stood out to me actually was actually Thomas Shukanik. I don't know if that
Yeah,
was the
that's
same.
that was the Czech goalie I had written down.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Sorry.
yeah,
So yeah, so he's a Red Wings draft pick. Shocker, Stevie Y.
why? Oh,
And he was
God.
actually, I want to say he almost started in the NHL last year. Was like a backup or something last year. I'm pretty sure. Craigie Button was going off about his potential and the fact that Detroit's got another guy in the works. He was so good against Canada, man. Like there was
Oh yeah.
in the preliminary games, not the semis. In the
Mm-hmm.
preliminary game, there was a sequence, I think, in the first period or something that I remember my brother and I watching it and just going, this kid's made 3 grade A saves. Like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
talking sliding back door. I'm talking like
Mm-hmm.
backdoor 1Ts where you got to get your glove up and stay tall. And he's it's a very tough comparison to make, but I almost thought, I'm like, wow, this kid reminds me of Carey Price when he was that young. Just
Mm-hmm.
never once looked small, never once made any of the game bigger than it needed to be. Was one save at a time, was one shot at a time, was 1 second at a time, and he just lived in the moment. And he was just
Yeah.
so good at keeping that team cool, calm and cool. And obviously, it proved, they went out and beat the United States, dude, a top four
Yeah, that's
team. That, like,
wild.
I mean, that's a whole disappointment
Wild.
in its own right. But yeah, like goaltending was a huge factor this year. I really don't think Garand had to do too much. I mean, realistically,
No.
he made the saves he needed to and was
Yep.
helped along the way to make the saves when needed to. But yeah, it's interesting for sure, to say the least. But a few guys that really stood out to me, that Jan Mishak from Czechs, dude. He's a Montreal draft pick. I think he's I want to say 3rd rounder or something like that, dude. Holy man, like this kid's gonna play in the show,
Mm-hmm.
no doubt about it.
Oh yeah.
When we were talking earlier about the leadership, about the presence, their number one center, winning draws, everything, right? He really impressed me. A couple of kids on Canada that impressed me. I mean, no doubt about that Stan Coven kid. That kid can
Mm-hmm.
play. The
He was
biggest
good.
thing that he reminds me, and so much of a young Joe Pavelski. It's incredible. Smaller, right-handed shot, loves to go to the net, will work for the dirty areas. But did you see the clinic he put on in the face-off draw, dude? I'm
Yeah, he
pretty
was
sure
good.
he
That was
finished the tournament with like 92% face-off wins or something. I'm pretty sure one
probably
game he went 19 of 21 or something like that. Just
stupid.
ridiculous numbers. And
Yep.
especially when you look at the show nowadays, the importance of puck possession, if you
Yep.
can start a centerman in either the defensive or offensive zone with a likelihood this guy's winning 75 plus percent. I mean, that's not say 75, 55 plus percent of his draws in the NHL. You got a winner right there. Dallas Stars got a good ass hockey player in Logan
Yep.
Stankoven. And there was one other player I just had written down here. I was going to touch base about that Wallstad as well, but it was at Atu Ratti, centerman of the Finn. He's a New York
Mm,
Islanders prospect. He had 10 points in 7 games, which is equally as impressive. And
it's pretty
especially
good.
too when you look at the way that they were putting their lines out, they were running 4 lines a lot of the time. They had one of the strongest lineups in terms of draft prospect capital in the
Yep.
entire team, in the entire tournament. Pardon me. They opened up the pretty sure they opened up the tournament plus 250 to win it, which is the highest odds. Canada plus 400 next, so they were the favorite of the tournament. But
Yeah.
dude, yeah, that Otto Ratti, I mean, they got a couple studs. I've been going off for weeks too, just my big main gun. And who I've been talking about this kid since I've seen him as a 16-year-old in the tournament. Joakim Kemmel of the Finland is going
Yeah.
to be
A
I'm
rock
telling you
star.
right now, he's going to be an easy 30 goal scorer in the NHL.
Yep.
Easily. The kid, his shot is already an NHL caliber shot. He's got the size and he's got the speed. Joakim Kemmel, everybody. Nashville Predators, 17th overall pick this year. Bank it, because that kid's going to make some cookies in the show. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Anything else to touch base on? I did want to briefly, too, just to kind of, not to shit on the tournament, but there's no chance they can do this again in the summer, right?
No.
Right? I mean, does it
No.
make sense? I want to see the numbers.
No.
I mean, I know the semifinals of both Canada's side and I guess Finland's game against Sweden, right? We're pretty well represented in terms of attendance. But you look at some of those games. I mean, you're bringing in 4,000, 5,000 people in a stadium that holds 40. Right? How many people were
Yeah.
really watching it on TV? Like, I feel bad saying it, but even some of the games that I thought I'd be super interested in, I'm like, I'm flipping on the Blue Jays game right now. I mean, it isn't doing it for me, right? I don't know if it's the style of
Yeah.
play or what it is, but I found it tough to get into it this year. Um, Obviously, a couple prospects you would have liked to see. There's always every year players that could have played. I mean, McDavid could have been in the World Juniors for it felt like 10 fucking years. But there, Owen Power, Shane Wright, Matty Berniers weren't there. I mean, when you get this close to training camp, I was shocked in its own right that Anaheim even let McTavish go. He must have worked pretty hard and said a lot of things to get himself to be able to go. But
Yep.
it just surprised me that some of those players that might be able to play in the show this year didn't choose to go, didn't want to go. So that
Hmm.
kind of didn't help with the attendance, and then obviously the TV ratings. Well, surely we will see those numbers sooner than later.
Yeah.
Can't imagine they were very good. You know what I mean?
No.
So
No.
it's tough time of year. I'm sure come December it's going to be different again, and everybody should kind of come back to par. But um, kudos for IIHF for putting it on. Thank you, but
Yep.
let's keep it as a one and done, right? Say the least. Um,
Yep.
uh, but anyways, I'm kind of moving on from that perspective because I think we can kind of go all day on what we thought and didn't think. Kind of want to just go right into the big news, man. I mean, like, there's been a lot going on in this last, let's call it week and a half or so. Obviously, the big one in Calgary was, you look at a month ago and how they go from losing Gaudreau, losing Kachuk, ideally bringing in a very good package for Kachuk and getting Uyghur and Huberdeau. But everyone's sitting there thinking, well, you're still taking a step back, right? They go out and sign Nazem Kadri 7x7. What's your take?
So now instead of a step back, it's like a half a step back, and it's not that bad. Having Kadri at 7x7 was, I think, cheaper than I was expecting. Even though he's probably worth in around that 7, maybe just a little under. I thought that he was going to get overpaid. Thought he was going to look at getting 8 or 9, but maybe GMs around the league were like, nope, we're not giving you that amount. So it led to 7, but. No, good for Calgary. He's a player that gets in under your skin, a player who can put up points on the board, a guy that now can replace. I'm not saying like he's just like Matthew Tkachuk, but has that same playing style, and I think that'll be great for Calgary. He can play alongside Huberdeau and maybe Mangiapane. I don't know how the lamps are going to look. Obviously, that's up to Daryl Sutter, but no, I think it's a good move for them, and it fills the void of now you've got Huberdeau and Tkachuk, and now you lost. Or not Huberdeau and Tkachuk, Jesus. Huberdeau
And Kadri.
and Kadri, and then you've replaced with, you got Gaudreau and Kachuk, who have now are gone. But you know what? Good for Brad Treliving. I think he made good moves considering what, the hand was had dealt to him. So, no, good for him. I think Calgary's not going to be in. They got Mackenzie Weegar, too. So you got like another D-man plus 2 forwards. So I don't know. I think they'll be all right next year. I don't think they're really hurting that bad now after that signing.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up three good points there. Tree living, kudos. You really could have accepted defeat and just kind of said, okay, I'm, not necessarily taking a step back, but let's regroup a little bit this year, see what we have, and go from there. He
Yep.
just said, screw that, right? Like, he didn't need to worry about what was going on. He's always been pursuing, or Calgary, I should say, not necessarily Tree living, has always pursued Kadri, even back to his Maple Leaf days. If you remember correctly, Nazem Kadri actually vetoed a trade to Calgary. I cannot specifically remember, but I'm pretty sure it was revolving around Kadri and Sam Bennett. I believe the package kind of
Mm.
close to it, and Kadri vetoed going out there. So that was a big thing for them that they stuck to their guns and were able to get him. Obviously, you brought up the Uyghur thing.
Yep.
It's tough to lose two top six forwards. It's even, in
Yep.
my opinion, it's tougher
Mm-hmm.
to gain a top four defenseman. So when you look at
Yep.
it, Calgary, one of the best offenses in the entire league last year. And as much as they kind of transitioned a few players, they still have their main pivot centerman in Elias Lindholm, who's arguably
Yep.
one of the most underrated players in the entire league, and
Yeah.
should very well be a Selke candidate next year, without doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you look at that perspective of saying, okay, we didn't necessarily get worse offensively, but we did get better defensively, I think
Yep.
it's a win for me personally, right? The biggest thing that I look at, just strictly from being an Oilers perspective, and the reason that Calgary lost, it wasn't that they couldn't compete with Edmonton. It was just simply that Edmonton's best players were better than Calgary's best players. There's no other way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants Draisaitl and McDavid, and they go, "Oh, there's such a massive drop off in Edmonton between McDavid and Draisaitl in their top six." No shit. Do you know how good Draisaitl and McDavid are? There should be a drop off to your third best
Oh
forward,
yeah.
and if there isn't, then that's pretty damn good hockey team. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at it, and people argue with me, they're like, "Well, Edmonton's top six. You've only got Hyman and you've got Yamamoto in there with Nugent Hopkins or something." And I'm going, they'd be top six forwards on just about any hockey team in the league right now. I'm pretty sure
Mm-hmm.
31 other teams would love Evander Kane at $5.1 million. That's going to
After
be
the
a
year he had.
steal
Oh my god.
next year.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and I said, like, at the end of the day, Calgary wasn't a bad team. It just simply came down to the fact that realistically, Edmonton was able to put out the lines when they needed to,
Yep.
capitalize on their advantage when they could. And
Yep.
basically, Mike Smith just had to be equal, if not comparable, to Markstrom, right? So
Markstrom. Yep.
it was
Yep.
interesting. Like you, I'm pretty high on the Flames next year. I don't see how they can't take a step back realistically, especially from
Yeah.
being in the Pacific Division. And you do have quite a few teams in the West that are iffy nowadays, and you're going to get your 9-10 games out of those guys. So you should
For
expect to
sure.
win. But the parity in the NHL nowadays is probably as high as it's ever been, right? Recently, Johnny Gaudreau
Mm-hmm.
going to Columbus, right? A lot of shocking
I think
signings. There's a
about
lot of
that.
big trades that teams are now
Yeah.
no longer in the dump. You got your Chicago Blackhawks of the world that are falling off the cliff. Everybody thought Pittsburgh was going to fall off the cliff, and they kept their three alive or whatever, right? So you never know when Pittsburgh's going to, ideally within the next couple of years, they're going to have to. They're not can't play till they're 80. But you're starting to see that revolution a little bit kind of turning around. LA Kings, I'm
Yeah.
sure, going to be similar within the next couple of years. They've done a very good job at keeping their system together with the big pieces they have. But I'm
Yeah.
kind of digressing a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah.
big shakeup. I mean, we can talk about that kind of closer to the season of teams that we're kind of expecting or not expecting, whatever, to do better. Um, even too, just news out today, Paul Stastny is off the board. He went to the
Saw that.
Hurricanes, which is big news. So it's not necessarily a huge piece, but for them to bring in a major veteran presence, they went and added Pacioretty, Burns, and now Stastny this year. Yes, they're getting a little bit older, but that's a hell of a lot of experience. I understand
Yep.
Pacioretty is not playing. I don't know when he's going to come back. That could be a full season LTIR. It could be this or that, whatever. But to add Stastny for their third line center, PK, that's great pickup for them. He's going to slide in effortlessly. Couple other free agents still out there, though. Phil Kessel, PK Subban. Evan
Phil.
Rodriguez technically is still out there. Evan Rodriguez, I think, if I'm correct, had 30 goals in Pittsburgh, didn't he? I think maybe I'm wrong. You go ahead. I'm going to look that up there quick. But what's your just take on some of those free agents that are still out there? Where do you think Filthy Phil's going to end up?
Phil. Oh, good old Phil. Holy, has he ever been in the present? Toronto for so many years. You know, that name comes up everywhere. He's a fan favorite. Everyone loves him. I don't know. I've heard rumors to the Oilers, but I just don't know like what they're gonna pay or where he's gonna fit. I mean, I've heard that and Subban. I've been hearing news that way too. I mean, if you get Subban on a cheap deal, I think he wouldn't be bad on your back end. When he was having a 9.5 million price tag attached to him, everyone's like, "Whoa, I am not touching that." But if you get him on a really cheap deal, I don't see why Subban wouldn't. He'd be a good fit for that the bottom, end of that the D core. So I don't know where exactly. I mean, that's only rumors I've heard. So who God knows where he ends up. But I mean, who knows? Maybe Toronto on the end. But they'd have enough D men as it is. But I don't know. I don't know where those guys end up. I'm surprised they're not signed yet, though. I mean, they're still names as they're getting older in their career, sure. But I mean, I'm surprised they haven't been signed yet. Maybe they're wanting a little more than they think they can, get.
Yeah, so two things. I mean, first, three things. A, Rodriguez did not score 30 goals. He was a 19 goal scorer, so I blew smoke on that one. He did have 43 points, though, so it was a career year, which is up from his previous high of 29 points to 43, which is a pretty significant jump, I'd say.
Yep.
So good for him. He even had 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points in 7 playoff games this year, too. So could prove it, right? So
Yep.
that's my bad. That's my dash for the day. Dash. But Filthy Phil, tough man. I really think he's one of those domino pieces that's gonna come into effect now that a lot of these free agents are kind of clearing names. I personally, this is just an opinion. I really think that Islanders had a big push for Kadri and then ideally would have ultimately affected their 2 recent signings, right? So they just re-signed Dobson, and then they recently just re-signed. Shoot, I forget who they also just re-signed. So
Romanoff and Bellows. They signed Kiefer Bellows too.
Romanoff and Dobson. That's right. So 2 key pieces on their defensive core. Obviously, they're going to re-sign those guys, but it's just a matter of making the money fit, right? If you're bringing in Kadri at 7 some odd mil, they're going to have to move somebody else out, right? It's tough to clear a crappy contract these days. Unless you're Kyle Dubas that just wants to throw around first rounders like they're pieces of bubble gum. But I just couldn't see that. So I think there's dominoes, which I get into Kessel, like I said, is he's going to go to a team and you already know he's going to outperform his contract. Like it's too obvious if you give him a 1 year, 3 mil or something like that, he's going to outperform that. Like I don't think he had a very good year for goal scoring, but I think he still had 40 some odd apples, which would be probably top 5 assist totals for just about any team in the league, right? If he puts up 43 points and just shoots a bit better than I think 4% or something that he was this year and goes a little bit more to the norm, not 8-9% even, he scores 7-8 more goals, right? And out of nowhere, he's no longer a 60-point guy and he jumps into the 70-point plateau. You get him with the right guys, right? I'd love to see him go back to Pittsburgh for one.
Yeah,
I think he'd be a good fit in Toronto as well, ironically. The only reason I don't see it fitting in Toronto is I don't like the dynamics of their second and or third line. And I also don't see him fitting into the power play. So why would he choose to want to go there? In my opinion, I don't know. I don't disregard the Edmonton side of things. I think having the right shot is a good upgrade, but I don't think that's where they really need it, so to speak. I don't know. I don't have a specific team. I kind of feel like he's going to go to not a contender, but a middle team, middle rank, and just sort of outplay his contract, possibly go to a team that's a little bit lower, get traded at the deadline. Maybe that's his game plan, right? Or from another team's perspective, more often than not, they're the ones that sign you knowing that you're going to trade you at the deadline. And basically it's just a free draft capital pickup, right? But so there's quite a few good names left out there. I think now that Kadri's gone and a couple of the signings are in play, you're going to start to see more contracts thrown out, pardon me. maybe see a couple more PTOs this year, just so that you're not screwing yourself over and not getting the money that the player's worth. You bring in a PTO, and it's almost like a under the table arbitration, right? See how you're going to fit, see what happens. Maybe you're not a good fit with our locker room. Instead of just out paying for them, like Subban in particular, that's who I think of with
Yeah.
this particular example. I don't
Yep.
think people want to pay him very much money right now because they don't know if he can actually still play. Um,
Yeah.
he's always
I
going to bring
agree.
energy. He's going to bring aggressiveness and attitude, but
Yeah.
he's always going to have the shot, sure. But has he ever thought the game extremely well? Has he ever truly made a crazy impact consistently? Right, 2 years you can think of particularly. Right, the
Yeah.
first year he came in the playoffs, and then I think the 1 year with Nashville he scored 20 goals or
Yeah.
something like that. But
Yeah.
other than that, I mean, good for you for getting that massive paycheck, but I don't see it coming, right? So I could see him going to a team that is very, very similar to Kessel. Maybe they both go together. I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
good veteran, 1-2 if you really want to add that, considering they're both bottom line players now. But that could be
Yep.
an interesting way to look at it. Just to kind of speed it up a little bit, just to go in, because I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of time here. Patty Kane, big news recently. I mean, I think we talked about it. Every single GM needs to be making a call to Chicago. If you're not doing your due diligence. Every team
Yeah.
wants a guy like Patty Kane. You can't pay him 10.5 mil. That's not going to happen. Can you get him at 50%? How many teams at this time of year in contention still have $5 million to play with? Not many. So
Not
the
many.
way I see it, it's either A, you're overpaying for him, and it's tough to say about a guy like that because you don't know where his head's at next year. You might get him for 1 year. You really want to give up a high-end draft pick and a first rounder for Patty Kane if you end up losing him? If you win the cup, it's worth it. But how many teams
Yeah.
truly want to take that risk, right? So that's where I think this is where it's going to come in. You're going to get a third team involved. I'm telling you right now, prediction time. Patty Kane
The
is
North
going to
Six
be
prediction
traded
time.
this offseason. Patty Kane will be traded in a three-way trade at which both teams will retain 25% of the value and Chicago will trade 50% or hang on to 50%. That will happen because then you
Yep.
get Patrick Kane at about 2.75 million, which holy fuck. You can
Oh,
get
you're
that guy
laughing.
in your lineup for under 3 mil. You're laughing. Problem
You are
being,
laughing.
that's a lot of work on the back end, right? So I know his name's been swirling around with the Leafs lately. The Oilers have been tied to him for the last couple
Saw
months,
that.
actually.
Yep.
But I just don't see it, right? I think I said this to maybe you or someone last week. Look out for Vegas on this one. Watch out for the Vegas Golden Knights with that $12 million in LTIR that they've got rung up. That could be someone that steps up and gets Patrick Kane now.
Who's on there? Shea Weber and who?
Robin Leonard.
Oh shit.
They
Yeah,
almost
you're
have
right.
$12.5 million to deal with in long-term IR. Both of those players have basically said they're not playing for the next season. So
Do you look
they
at
still need a
if you're
goalie,
Vegas?
right? They still
The
need a goalie.
goalie's
I get
huge.
that.
Yeah.
But let's say you go out and get a goalie at 2.5 mil, you technically can go over the cap by almost 10 mil. You could bring in Kane at full value and not have to give up a full first rounder or draft picks, whatever, if you've got the cap.
Yeah.
Think about it. Three-way trade, right? Chicago, Vegas, and I don't know, Arizona
Arizona.
maybe? They're very well ready to take on Cap, right?
That Lemonade
And
team
then
is
you're
strong.
starting five, Jacob Chikrin, Keller, and in goaltender, $6 million in cap. ASU fans, raise your hands.
Oh
I
my
mean,
god.
I could see it, right?
Wow.
Three-way trade there, right? It's going to have to go down like that to
Yep.
make the number work. But speaking of Arizona, too, Jacob Chikrin, that guy still wants out, right? A lot of teams that are going to be very, very interested in his services. So
Yeah.
you never really know. I think he comes to a contender personally.
Oh yes.
I think he doesn't get traded until about a month in. There's going to be injuries, unfortunately. There's going to be teams that are ready to move on. There's going to be teams that weren't in the playoffs picture that, or vice versa, should have been and are not going to be in the playoffs. There's so many different things that happen about a month to 2 months in, just before Christmas, that I could see him maybe trade deadline, but I could see him going a bit before the deadline just to really improve on a couple teams. And he's going to be a tremendous pickup no matter what way you front that. I think he'd be a good fit in any Canadian market because he just seems like the kind of dude that could handle himself. We hear that a lot. We see that a lot, and then it doesn't work out. You have a lot of guys that come to Canadian markets and outperform it. Who knows, right? What about you? Any other free agents? Any other trades you kind of are expecting to see, or could we see that you're kind of thinking of?
I just want to go back to Kane, Patrick
Yeah,
Kane on my
absolutely. Yeah.
takes, and well, there's two options that I had in my head, and they haven't really been brought up much. But I think the New York Rangers is an option. I think they can put together a nice package. The Rangers are in a, I want to say win now situation, but it's getting close. Like they've been very close a couple years, especially last year. They're in the conference finals against Tampa Bay. They played well. They played great. They got a good goaltender. He's one of the best in the world. And then you got, Panarin. Kreider had his best season. I'm interested to see if he can do something that's similar next year. I don't know. And then Zibanejad, who had a great playoff year. And then we talked about earlier, like you said, Trouba played amazing. You got Lindgren on the back end. There's so many key pieces. And then eventually, if Kako and Lafreniere, they start playing well and they get outside those entry levels, now they're in a big question mark. So maybe they're in that 2-year window where maybe we should put something big together and try and do this thing. And I think that'd be a great place for him. It's closer to home for him. But I think that'd be a key spot. And then the other one was Buffalo. Would he go home? I don't know. I don't know if he's looking to win or he just wants to go home. I don't know. That's the only kind of tie I have with Buffalo. Play with the young guys, but then just to play in your hometown with your home fans. He's done it all. He's won everything. So we'll see there. But yeah, those are the key ones for that. Any other free agencies? I can't think of the top of my head. A lot of them have been signed, and then obviously Kessel and Subban were the only two. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like
I don't
you were
know.
saying,
It's
we got to
interesting to see.
kind of wait it out for the rest of the year. There's always going to be a couple
Yeah,
depth pieces that are still going to find some teams, like your Tyler
yeah.
Motts of the world. I don't know how is still a UFA
Mm-hmm.
right now. Like that guy's going to go and make. He'll be like your Andrew Kopp of last year. Next year, Tyler Mott's going to come onto a team and they're going to fan base to just fall in love with the dude and just love him to death because he
Yeah,
just does
yeah.
everything you want for your hockey team, but specifically does this tough things like you need in the playoffs.
Yep.
So yeah, it's interesting, and obviously too when we get a little bit closer, some of those things should be a little more clear now, a little more transparent as to where teams are heading, maybe want to be heading, that type of deal. So always so much to worry about when you get towards training camp too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, so I mean, like I said, there's still lots of time, like 40 some odd days, right? There's plenty of time to work with and see where we go, and maybe we'll see a few big trades still, right? I mean, obviously everyone's still looking at Kane and Taves as to getting out of there. There's a few players around the league that have been maybe talked about as potential trade candidates, a little toward their end of their contracts, whoever,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Um, Two specifically went to Carolina this year, Brent Burns and Pacioretty. So those were two big names off the list there. But yeah, it's interesting. We'll kind of just have to wait and see, right? A little bit of the waiting game now at
Exactly.
this point.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. No, for sure.
but yeah, so I do want to touch too. So this one to kind of go on and end it on a little bit more of a an upbeat note here. I want to ask you here, if you were to look from a purely sports perspective here, Canada, just look Canada sports, and you were to go, I think this is the best team in Canada amongst any sport, basketball, hockey, lacrosse, fucking pro wrestling if you want. Who is Canada's, and maybe not best team? If you want to go best, sure, but best and or favorite team. What's your take?
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. If you're gonna go by, if you're gonna go by best team and have the most success in the past year, yeah, hate to say it, but you gotta go Edmonton Oilers. They got to the third round. They're by far they prove themselves that they can do it. They just they're one step away from getting over that hump. I mean, you play Colorado, was an absolute juggernaut, and it's a tough matchup regardless. You can even see it against Tampa Bay. I mean, they took them to 6, but they just walked them. They walked Tampa Bay almost, and it was insane because they won the 2 years before that. Favorite team, Canada wide. I don't know. That's a hard one. I mean, I think you got to go Canada wide. I don't know. You go Blue Jays or Raps maybe because everyone's cheering for the one team across the whole country. The Raps won 3 years ago, so that was a huge moment for them.
Mhm.
And I think the Blue Jays have been, one of, let's just say, one of the favorites to win it all. I mean, they're having a bit of a slump, but you'd have to think those two just because you got Canada behind them rather than just an individual province.
Right. And so that's kind of where I was leading into. It's very difficult to judge on that particular one. They're going to have a lot of
Yeah.
opinions because hockey is such a touchy one because there are 7 teams in Canada. So it's very unlikely if your favorite team is not one of the better ones, you ain't going to choose someone else, right? I don't
Yep.
necessarily think of it that way. I don't really see hockey too high on Canada's list.
Yep.
I'm in the same boat, man. Like I go with the Raptors. The Raptors are
Yeah.
Canada's team right now, dude. Like when you think about it, they won a championship not long ago. They
Yep.
sure as shit outperformed everybody's opinions last year. Obviously, with the
Yep.
progression that Scotty Barnes has had now, they've got a solidified like front 5 that can compete absolutely in the East. Are they going to win? Probably not. But I mean, just still looking at it, I know today, as of August 23rd, early this morning, Kevin Durant said he's staying with the Nets. But staying, what's that mean? He's just extending his fucking Airbnb for 3 more days in Brooklyn? Like, what's staying, right? The guy didn't get what he wants, so he's all pissed off. Don't trade me then, blah, blah. Like, fuck off, right? Like, that guy's attitude is about as
Yeah.
poor as it. He might as well play for the Leafs, that fucking guy, because he fit in perfectly with media here. But if he comes to the Raptors, and let's say you don't give up Scotty, let's say you can still keep Pascal, you're probably not giving up Fred VanVleet in that trade either. Wouldn't you do it? And would they not be arguably Canada's best team if they had KD come here with those guys?
It depends how the way he performs in the I don't say performs in the locker room, but how he acts around the guys. Like, is he a good leader? Is he going to push the other guys to win? That's what Kawhi Leonard did. He's a great player on the court, great defensively. That's something KD lacks. But damn, KD's probably one of the best players in the league.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, news came out. I'm interested to know what happens now because he had the ultimatum saying if I'm staying, Nash and the GM are gone, and that's kind of like an eye opener for those guys. Like no one, like in the NHL, no one says that like, hey, I want to stay here, but you got to go fire the GM and the coach. That's how much power that guy has. One individual on a team. Imagine if like McDavid and Matthews came out and said like, yeah, we want to get rid of Keefe and Dubas. What?
Literally,
it's
though,
insane. Basketball is insane. It's
very,
crazy how much that guy has power.
it's very similar. Hey, Leaf fans, what would you do? Austin Matthews strolls his little fucking sandal wearing motherfucking ass up to Kyle Dubas and says, Arizona looks pretty good, don't it, bud? And he goes, what do you mean? Well, that's where I'm going to be if your dumbass is still in charge of the Leafs in 2 years.
Yeah, it's wild.
Right? And
yeah,
at the end of the day, who's got more buying power, right? Austin Matthews or MLSE? I'll tell you one thing, the GQ cover boy
34.
is doing all damn right these days in terms of gaining power for himself, right? And he loves the Toronto media's attention. So that's interesting.
Yeah, but
anyways, I know I'm a little bit diverting, but I wanted to give another one. So I'm actually going to go off the board, and I'm going to say my number 2, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, the Watermelon Heads, bro.
Yeah,
like when
we don't see it as much in Ontario, but they're huge.
But you always see it, and they've had a good squad. I mean, I know it's only 7-8 teams in the CFL, and I'm not going crazy saying, "Oh, you got to go watch a Rough Riders game," but that's a passionate ass fan base, dude.
Yeah,
it's just like they watch almost more CFL than they do NFL and MLB, NBA out there. It's crazy, dude. So the Rough Riders get my honorable mention. Go Watermelon Heads. Right? The cheese heads, the Green Bay Packers of the CFL.
My old head pro is like he grew up in that area, and he says it's fucking nuts there. Like it's crazy. Like they fill stadiums left, right, and center. Like we only see the Argos, and like I don't know. I don't think they really fill. And it's not a big name out of all the sports that we watch here in Toronto. But yeah, he's in Saskatchewan. It's nuts. They go crazy for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I can believe that.
Yeah, dude, it's cool, right? Because they love their football that way. So, good old country boys that way, right? I wanted to bring this up. So this is actually where the stem of the conversation came from. I was just kind of reading in and doing some things I thought about, and I go, oh, that's kind of an interesting little topic. I ended up finding an article actually as of April 13th, so not too long ago, just this year.
Yep.
And it was a vote, and I'm just double checking that I can read this correctly here. It was part of a reputation study amongst 38,000 Canadians. I don't know the general specifics, but in terms of how they rank based on a reputation score, I'm assuming they gave it a score out of 100, right? The top three may not surprise you technically. Number one, we got it, Raptors. All right,
Yep.
reputation score of 59. Number two, the Bluebirds, right? Canada's teams, if you will. They have no competition in Canada, right? Number three was shocking to me. The Winnipeg Jets.
Wow.
Came in as number three as a reputation score of 55. So amongst Canada, and I was shocked to see a hockey team so high. You got your Alouettes and Stampeders, two CFL teams that top top five. Winnipeg Jets hopped in there, right? And they go back a while too, right? They've had quite the historic franchise. They've come, they've left, they've come back again. But a lot of love for the Winnipeg Jets.
Is this a consensus over like across Canada or in a certain province?
So it's. I'm gonna try and quickly read here. Participants were asked to give each team a score of out of 100. Survey results revealed the teams with the highest awareness did not necessarily have the highest reputation scores. I don't think it says anything specific about geographical. It just simply says that the Ledger published 10 most reputable franchises. Part of the 25th annual reputation study. Ledger surveyed more than 38,000 Canadians.
Okay. I
Whether
thought Montreal,
38,000 Toronto people, whatever, but I thought that to be pretty interesting, man, just as a kind of a quick little tidbit, but it definitely speaks. I mean, we're kind of in the same boat with that. We kind of understand it. Canada as a whole doesn't have as much basketball and baseball. It's just straightforward, right? So that was pretty neat. Little thing to end up on there, right? But
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So something to consider. Go Raps.
Yes, sir.
2019 Raps and 6, baby. All right, so finish off here. Let's talk just super quick. Obviously we've got the socials kind of going. I know we touched base a little bit last podcast on us moving forward, what we kind of want to do. We're obviously looking into a few different outlets, whether we're jumping in extremely fast or slow. I apologize if you're expecting anything, but we've been trying to just sort of get the following base going, which is cool. I think we'd like to do, and we've kind of briefly touched base on this, a potential 500 follower giveaway, or even potentially a 1,000 now that we're kind of starting to gain traction so quickly. So, maybe kind of stay in touch with that if you can, and kind of just keep engaging with the comments, engaging and letting us know if you like it and don't like it. It's pretty awesome, but keep your ears and eyes open for a potential giveaway at a certain follower rank. So, don't be afraid to tell your friends. But I just want to give a big shout out. So Loot Kingdom is a card shop here locally in Barrie, run by a gentleman by the name of Alex, who's been extremely helpful to you and I getting going, whether it's the cards, whether it's just knowledge on that, talking sports, understanding different things about just the sports world. I just wanted to give you a quick shout out to him. If you are interested in getting into that, I'm telling you right now, you're not too late to get in the sports cards. They're going to blow up very, very quickly. And if you do need any knowledge, if you're looking for any cards, favorite players, teams, whatever, ask us. Ask at Loot Kingdom. Loot Kingdom's, again, the name of the store here in Barrie, Ontario. And great dude, man, all around. So by all means, shout out to you, Alex. Thank you. We're going to continue going with a few options, taking the card route. It seems to draw quite a bit of attention and people talking. So I just wanted to kind of give my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree anymore. We are doing 24 days of ripping. I've got my packs here, so every day we're going to be ripping one pack, so stay tuned for that. That's all, giveaway courtesy by Luke Kingdom. So yeah, if you need your sports cards, Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, any of the cards, check out Luke Kingdom. He's got everything, and he can help you from there. Any information you need.
Love it. I think that's
Yeah.
going to touch up for today, dude. Wicked.
Yeah.
Thanks for jumping on. That was kind of neat. I'm hoping, if you guys are seeing this in full and or maybe following along with the video side of thing and or still sticking along with the pod, maybe you're just seeing these in clips and whatever. Even if you're listening this far, thank you. We really appreciate it, and definitely going to try and continue to get that content growing. We're kind of thinking of new ways and experimenting with what works and doesn't work for us. So bear with us while we do kind of figure out the niche a little bit more. And thank you so much. And obviously we'll touch base along the way here, you and I. But for everyone out there listening, thank you so much for the support, and we'll be back with you guys again soon. Ciao, banda.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
What up, North 6ix? Welcome to, and fuck me, we'll get that one out.